Hello everybody, my name is Nomad and welcome back to episode 2 of my Path to Mayhem series. In this series, we're going to go over the absolute fundamentals of Borderlands 3 and Moze, explaining mechanics, action skills, anointments, weapons, and leveling builds to help you stay on top of your game on your journey to level 65 and higher Mayhem difficulties. And before we get into the video, I just want to remind you guys that if you're new to the channel and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing too. Cool? Cool. So, in the last episode, we quickly covered off some early game mechanics and explained how Iron Bear works, as well as touched on a leveling tree to aim for in the very early stages of your gameplay. And in this episode, we're going to go a bit more into depth in a mid-game build for you guys to follow while progressing through the middle part of the story. And so without further delay, let's just get straight into it. So, at this stage of the game, I'm going to assume that you're anywhere between level 30 and 35, having either defeated or getting close to defeating Grey Ward, and almost finishing Eden 6. And this point of the game is pretty huge, as at that level, you can now reach capstone skills, which can dramatically increase the overall strength of your builds, and as well as that, you'll be able to equip artifacts too, provided you have killed Grey Ward, which can provide a ton of utility and damage depending on the artifact you choose. So think of artifacts as a bit of a pseudo class mod that can be equipped on any character. But before we get into the actual skill tree setup, I recommend let's touch on some pieces of gear to keep an eye out for at this stage. I'm also going to be putting links to these weapons and where you can get them in the description down below, courtesy of Loot Lemon. It's a very useful website, so if you're new to the game and just want to learn about what the weapons look like, what they do, and where to get them, I'll be putting a link to the website in the description down below, so feel free to check that out. But now, without further ado, let's just get straight into the weapons. And the first one that tops out this list is the Chaos. And if you've watched previous videos on my channel, you would already know that I'm a huge fan of this gun. But if you haven't, that's all good. The Chaos is a dual assault rifle with high accuracy and fire rate, with a solid damage number to back it up. It can roll in incendiary, shock, cryo, and corrosive elements. And now, the Chaos isn't your standard assault rifle. Oh no. Its special effect is that upon killing an enemy, they will explode with a nova that matches the element of your gun. And this nova deals splash damage too, which is incredibly useful when fighting enemies that are bunched up. Some points in this gameplay clip, you're going to see that I shoot a single enemy and the rest of the enemies just melt immediately. As per standard dual weapons, the Chaos has 2 firing modes, but I suggest using the full auto as a primary variant, as is the most useful and versatile. And if you want one for yourself, go beat up the psych abilities in Amber Maya for one yourself. The next weapon on this list is the Hornet. Moving on to the Chaos, and if you've played Borderlands 2, you'll be well familiar with this gun, but if not, not a worry. The Hornet is a burst fire, corrosive locked dual pistol that deals splash damage. The Hornet has a very solid base damage, really high fire rate, and is also incredibly accurate, being typical of standard dual weapons. And as you can see in the background gameplay, it is incredibly solid to use for mobbing and bosses as well. And if you want one for yourself, it drops from the Mother of Grogans in the Anvil. The next weapon on this list is the Hellfire, yet another returning weapon from Borderlands 2. The Hellfire is an incendiary locked dual SMG with high elemental damage chance and damage over time, as well as being able to spawn in a ×2 variant, meaning it gets an extra projectile. Now, although this may mean that you can chew through ammo a lot faster, since the ×2 variant consumes 2 ammo per shot instead of the ×1 variant, which only consumes 1, it's not a worry as long as you pace your shots, as redistribution can help a little with an ammo regeneration. However, this issue will be easily negated once you get more skill points and passive gear bonuses from artifacts and others, which is something we'll get into in later videos. For now, the Hellfire is an incredibly solid weapon, as the majority of enemies you'll be fighting are flesh-based, and surprise surprise, fire does more damage to flesh-based targets. The Hellfire can be yours today if you go beat up the Jabbermogwai in Voracious Canopy. Happy hunting! And taking up the 4th weapon slot is the Maggie. The Maggie is a Jacobs Master style revolver with multiple projectiles and a very solid base damage. Being a Jacobs, it's a fire as fast as you pull the trigger style affair, so I hope you all have a quick trigger finger. Rounding off its stats is a fairly fast reload speed and a decent magazine size too. In close range, this gun absolutely shreds and should not be underestimated. Drop some turnkey Tim in the Anvil. Hope you're ready to go back to prison. So the next pieces of gear that we got to talk about now are artifacts. However, bear in mind, you're only going to be able to equip artifacts once you kill Grey Ward, who is the Eden 6 Vault monster. And for all intents and purposes, there's one artifact that far outshines its competition, even in endgame level 65 builds, that being the Victory Rush Relic. The Victory Rush Relic gives you a solid damage boost when you kill a badass enemy, and also a movement speed bonus too, which is really good, what's not to love. Combine this with 3 passives that can include weapon damage, magazine size, and so on and so forth, and you can start to see why artifacts are so crucial in builds. The Victory Rush Relic can be yours by murdering Azalea in Jacob's estate. And by now, you also have been seeing class mods dropped from enemies and vendors. Class mods are class specific and boost certain skills, and also have special effects that can create entirely new playstyles depending on the one you equip. For Moze, there are 2 class mods that I was just trying to get now that are used even in endgame builds. Those being the Minesweeper and the Rocketeer class mod. Minesweeper drops from Archer Row in Meridian Metroplex once you complete the Dynasty Diner side quest. What this class mod does is it gives you a chance to spawn a micro grenade every time you hit a critical hit. Now this can be caused by grenade crits using skills like Pull the Holy Pin in Moze's Demolition Woman tree, or your own crits with your gun. This micro grenade scales from multiple different bonuses like weapon damage, splash damage, and elemental damage, and has the potential to create and dish out significant amounts of damage on mobs and bosses alike. I highly recommend this class mod if you're playing an infantry Moze build quite a lot. The next class mod I would suggest is the Rocketeer class mod that drops on Tumor Head in Lectra City once you complete the Proof of Wife side quest. The Rocketeer class mod is something I would suggest if someone is looking for a Sentry style Moze build where you can fight alongside your Iron Bear. It can also be used to draw aggro away from you as Moze if things get a little hectic, and also has the upside of Auto Bear just being an incredibly powerful force of nature as well, having the capability of melting bosses and mobs even in the most difficult endgame content. And if you're curious to see how powerful a Rocketeer build can get, feel free to look at my Mad Moze build that's on my channel. And moving on from these class mods, we're going to cover 2 leveling trees. The reason why there's 2 is one is focused on the Rocketeer class mod and the other is focused on the Minesweeper class mod. So stay tuned and we'll go through that shortly. Alright, and so for the Rocketeer build that I would suggest using at this point between level 30 and 35, it has a mix of blue tree, green tree, and red tree. Now obviously I would like to have more points, but at this I only assumed that you have about 33 points to spend, and that's why we followed this tree. So we have a single point in Shield Retribution, and more specifically the Security Bear skill. What Security Bear does is it gives Iron Bear a bubble shield that also gives it damage reduction too, helping it stay alive for longer and be able to fight alongside you for longer periods of time. So that's the single point in Shield Retribution. And moving on to Demolition Tree, we have Demolition Woman, and that is the Grizzled skill. We have Stainless Steel Bear, Tall Cross Motion, Auto Bear, Pull the Holy Pin, and Vampire. Now, starting off the top at Grizzled. Grizzled is a kill skill that reduces Moze's cooldown for Iron Bear. So once Iron Bear ends, the more kills you get, the faster Iron Bear gets back essentially. So that's why we have that. Max it at 5 points, and it helps a lot to get Iron Bear back quickly. Moving on from that, we have Stainless Steel Bear, and what Stainless Steel Bear does gives Iron Bear extra armor, fuel, and damage, and it just helps as well to be able to dish out more damage while in Iron Bear, as well as Auto Bear. Next, we have Tall Cross Motion, and what this skill is, it is a skill that helps boost your splash damage and splash radius, and it also applies to Iron Bear as well and Auto Bear. So when you're using things like the V35 grenades or the Vanquisher rocket pods, you're boosting your damage as well as your own damage as Moze if you're using splash based weapons. Moving off that, we have the crux of this entire build is Auto Bear. Without Auto Bear, the Rocketeer build just does not work. What Rocketeer does is essentially uses Auto Bear but increases the entire cooldown of Iron Bear and uses the rest of your fuel, meaning you have a very long duration of Auto Bear, instead of the typical 15 seconds that it would typically last. With Rocketeer, you're looking at about 1:30 to 2 minutes of Auto Bear uptime, which is huge. So that's why we have that. Next, we have Pull the Holy Pin. What this does is it enables Moze's grenades to crit, which means we can proc skills like redistribution, spread of munitions, and so on and so forth. But for all intents and purposes in this build, we just put the point here just to get down to Vampire to help us stay alive as Moze. What Vampire does is it basically helps restore your HP. Whenever you hit an enemy with a grenade, you restore HP. And also this helps Auto Bear heal itself as well, provided you're using things like the V35 grenade launcher or just any sort of splash damage. So that's Moze's Demolition tree out of the way. And moving on to Bottomless Mags, we have 4 skills: Darker Bear, Cloud of Lead, Soak the Embers, and Redistribution. Darker Bear is just a very useful skill to have, especially if you were to jump into Auto Bear while you have this skill equipped. You're just helping Iron Bear do a ton more damage, which is really useful. I believe the damage bonus is about 60%, which is very nice. Next, we have Cloud of Lead. Helps you as Moze to maintain your ammo economy, and it also gives Iron Bear as well a couple free shots, which is always nice, and the bonus instant damage never hurt anyone. Moving on to that, we have Stoke the Embers, or alternatively, you can move those 3 points of Stoke the Embers to Scrappy. Stoke the Embers is just a flat instant damage boost for both Moze and Iron Bear, and Scrappy gives you weapon damage, handling, weapon swap speed, and mode switch speed. So if you're using a lot of fire weapons, Stoke the Embers is nice, If you're using just a bunch of random different weapons and you like to swap between them depending on the weapons you're fighting, Scrappy will also be a very useful utility skill. So those 3 points you can put into whatever skill you prefer. Then we have Redistribution. Redistribution is a single point skill, and it gives you ammo regeneration and health regeneration every time you score a critical hit. For a single point this early into the tree, this skill is incredibly powerful. That is the Rocketeer build out of the way, and now we're just going to quickly move on to the Minesweeper build. And this tree is quite a bit different. Typically, I would be speccing into Demolish Orman tree if I was using a Minesweeper class mod, but I don't have that many points, and in all honesty, at this point in the game, just getting only short fuse isn't really that big of a damage bonus because short fuse is conditional on a percentage, whereas the other skills I picked up is always active more or less as long as you're killing enemies, so I found it more useful. However, in later levels and in the next video as well, when we're talking about a much higher level build, you will see short fuse plus a bunch of skills in the other tree as well. But in today's video, this is what we have. So we'll start off with Bottomless Mags, and we have Darker Bear, Cloud of Lead, Stoke the Embers, Redistribution, Scrappy, Scorching RPMs, Russian Defensive, and Special Spare. Now, we've already covered a few of these green tree skills, so we're just going to jump straight into Scorching RPMs. Scorching RPMs give Iron Bear and Moze extra damage in the form of Moze's fire rate and critical hit damage, and Iron Bear gets increased hardpoint damage. Hardpoints are essentially the weapons you use for Iron Bear, so that's why we have that. At 5 points, you get 15% fire rate, 20% extra crit damage, and 25% extra Iron Bear damage. Now this critical hit damage is very useful for Moze, and more specifically the Minesweeper build that we're trying to use right now. Minesweeper micronades do scale from the crit damage that you get, and that triggers the spawn, so being able to boost that crit damage means your Minesweeper micronades will be doing even more damage. So that's why we have that at 5 points. We have Russian Offensive as well, and for a single point we get to sprint while shooting, and also lifesteal. So it's a very useful utility skill for survivability and utility. Moving from that and rounding off Bottomless Mags, we have Specialist Bear. Once again, it just increases the damage you do with Iron Bear provided your hard points are matching. So for a single point and to push the damage of Iron Bear just a little bit more, it's very useful. Moving on from that and into Shield Retribution tree, we have Security Bear, Selfless Vengeance, Drowning of Brass, and Experimental Munitions. Now we already know what Security Bear does, so we'll just jump straight into Selfless Vengeance. And what this does is that whenever Moze reloads, she loses a little bit of HP, but also gets a 15% bonus instant damage for herself and allies. So if you're playing with friends and you want to give them an insanity damage boost, just reload and boom, you get 50% instant damage. Now once again, as I mentioned earlier in this video, instant damage is very useful in early game because flash-based targets take more damage to instant. So that's why we have that, and it's basically on-demand elemental bonuses, so being able to match elements depending on the situation is very useful. Moving on from that, we have Drowning of Brass. At 5 points, we get 20% gun damage per kill, and it caps out at 3 stacks, meaning at 3 kills, we get 60% gun damage, which is absolutely huge at this point in the game. And finally, capping out the tree, we have Experimental Munitions. Now what this does is that whenever Moze or Iron Bear scores a critical hit, they deal bonus instant damage. Once again, tying into the whole instant theme with this early game build is very useful. So that is the leveling tree, and I guess with that, most likely a nice place to wrap it up. I would have liked to cover an Iron Bear base build too, but there are some class moves that I feel would be very useful for that, and that's something I want to cover in a new video that I'll put out soon. So yeah, in the next episode, we're going to cover off Anointments as well, and a higher level build that focuses on Iron Bear, as well as an infantry build as well, that you can transition and build upon straight into endgame content, which is really good for that sort of flexibility that I know a lot of you guys are looking for. So until then though, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Salad?
See ya.
Yeah. Lasagna is nothing but just a layered salad.